trying to get all the cough out.
Right. It's like, okay, let me just get it all out at once and then that's it.
I'm like, come on, cough drop. Work.
Okay, do your job.
We are talking about the documentary Disclosure. It came out in 2020. Yeah, 2020.
Yes.
So, all right. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Ignacio Rivera, your host, and I'm here with.
Hi, everyone. My name is Drían Juarez.
Hi, Drían. I'm so happy that you are
Hi.
here. Drían and I were
Thank
at the
you.
Creative Change Conference together at the Desire Mapping Institute, and I got to hear her speak, and I was just like, oh, we have to do a Connecting the Dots together.
Well, thank you
uh,
for inviting me. This is going to be fun. I'm so
yes,
excited.
yes, thank you. And so I asked, what should we discuss? And you recommended Disclosure. And so it was on my list of things to watch. And so I watched it, took some notes, and we're just going to dive right in and talk about it. So I just want to get your first, response reactions to the documentary.
Well, on one hand, I'm really happy we're talking about Disclosure because I'm putting the energy out there that it gets the Oscar for documentary this year. I think that would be a lot of
Yes, yes,
firsts in terms of, a trans director and producer and just the content. And so let's put it out into the universe that it gets the
yes,
Oscar and blows
yes,
up
yes.
because it is powerful. I think the first sort of reaction I had was that so many of the clips, like especially the clips from the 80s, like Arsenio Hall
Yes.
and Jerry Springer and Maury Povich clips, were the clips that I grew up with. And so, and like the movies like The Crying Game, and as a young person, kind of just absorbing it,
Yeah.
not really even understanding its impact on me, not really being able to have a critical lens to what I'm seeing. It was just like it hitting you.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, watching it gave me the opportunity to really think about those moments and think about their impact and like, wow, that was really fucked up. And I think for me, that's really the value of this film, that it kind of clears the fog of how media has impacted our lives in so many different ways, personally, and in terms of how we see ourselves, but also how society sees us,
Yes, yes.
often portrayed as having some mental illness or something's wrong with us, or,
Mm-hmm.
predators in some kind of way. And I think we see the impact of that in, anti-trans bathroom bills and things like
Yes.
that. That's this fear and hate that's really unfounded because so few people know us. If you
Yeah.
look at the statistics, and yet they have such strong opinions about who we are, what we do, and how we do it. And so,
Right.
I hope this film starts clearing up all of that and waking people up to that.
Mm-hmm. Put when they showed a lot of the clips, it reminded me of a lot of the stuff and the things that I saw, and I wrote some notes because the first one that I always remember and one that I wanted to watch over and over and over was Victor Victoria. For me, that was
Hmm.
it because when I saw that, I didn't have any language for it. I didn't know. Like I just saw it, and I loved Julie Andrews' look,
Hmm.
and not only that, I was actually less interested in that she was a woman pretending to be a man, pretending to be a woman, but it was the visual for me of her as a man kissing the guy that was interested in her, even though there was a point that he realizes or he finds out that she is a woman. There's a piece in the movie where he's almost like, I don't give a shit because I have a feeling for her. So that visual of these two masculine, or I should say, masculine presenting people kissing and being together was like, that was the thing for me. Like, I loved it. So I just took it away. I took it out of my head that she was pretending, but that I wanted to see this. It represented something for me, and I just loved watching that. Mm.
Yeah, I love that film. And, for me, I just remember thinking about, like, I think this is my first time really, like, or one of those moments where I had such an appreciation for, you know, uh, like this incredible power that gender fluidity has, and this individual who could, sort of be on stage and call upon their feminine energies, and then be off stage and call upon their masculine energies. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I like just remember recognizing or seeing something in that as powerful and thinking like, ooh, I want to
Yeah.
be like her. Like she's the one, like
Yeah.
she's, it, like, and so just for me, it was this recognition of like, wow, this is a power. This is like a superhero power that you get to have,
Yes.
Um, and I think for trans people, I think it's important to recognize that, yeah, being gender fluid, being trans, being a person who evolves out of an assigned identity, I think it's a like a trial by fire, and
Mm.
so you really wake up to your strengths and also, what you want to, fortify.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, and I think there was I mentioned to you prior that someone had said, and I wrote the quote down, um, in talking about, because of the lack of representation, and trans people or gender nonconforming people not seeing themselves on cinema, and how difficult it is, and the misrepresentation when there is the little representation, that they made a case in saying that children cannot be what they cannot see. And and I understood that line, but I also said to myself, when the person said that, I was like, but everyone in this documentary talks about the very lack of the representation and how difficult it was. But even still, with that, people found their way, and they were able to be the wonderful people that they are, and express in the face of all of this, negativity and misrepresentation, and negative labeling, and all of these things. But what it does is it makes it a hell of a lot easier for, young trans and gender nonconforming and non-binary people. And I think one of the things that really hit home was um, that it is, if we had more representation and it was much more broader than the fucked up pieces of representation that were out there, wouldn't, it would not weigh anything, because it would just be pieces of those things out there. But right now, because it's the only thing, that's where people get their information, right? And the information is really shitty. Really shitty. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that's part of the impacts of what we're seeing now, even I think with like, um, politically what we saw happen. I think that their media has had a long standing impact on our perception of the world, um, and uh, and we're just starting to recover from that. And I think
Mm,
disclosure represents that first step towards that recovery and that healing, that
mm,
acknowledging that it was fucked up, and recognizing what was fucked up about it, I think is also
mm,
important for people to learn, what's bad.
yeah.
Um, and I'm hopeful that, because there are so many content producers now, and because making content has become such an entrepreneurial thing, people can do it in lots of different ways.
Right.
And so, we're putting out more and more good content that really does authentically describe our experiences and
Yeah.
identities. And I'm hopeful that that's starting to tip that balance,
Yeah.
of good representations, and hopefully, the bad ones will start to become a thing of the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And and that we can, reflect on them and never have those things come up again.
Yeah. I am really looking forward to the time where I think I've seen one movie, and someone in the documentary mentioned another other movies from the past that there were trans people in the film, but or there was a trans character in the film, but their transness was never brought up. And I was like, that's what I want. That's what I would like. I would like to watch a movie where that's an everyday person that exists within our world right now, right? It doesn't become this thing, this giant thing that they're that we're a part of everyday existence. And so I forget, there was, I think I saw this movie called Culture Shock, I think, and there was a trans um, uh, person on this, one of the main characters too, and they did not bring up her transness throughout the whole thing, and I was like so loving it. I was so loving it, and it wasn't the thing that they picked on her about. It wasn't. And in my mind I was just like, wow, is this a utopia? Yeah, shitty to think that, but I was like, is this a utopia? Is this unrealistic? This is what I'm thinking when I'm watching it. On one hand, I'm like, this is great, and on the other, I was like, this isn't real. And it's fucked to think that, but like the experiences of trans women, you know, um, in everyday life, and then what is represented on media. What they say, GLAD, I wrote it down. GLAD did a study to see the images or representations of trans people in media, and they said that overall the images of trans people were trans women and sex workers. Yeah, and that uh, they were either like psychopaths, they were dying of cancer, or dying of because something with their hormones. It's always about their hormones are killing them or something. I thought that was just too much.
And I think, like, talk about the evidence against having cis heteronormative writers try to tell our stories, like, you couldn't ask for better evidence. And I think that's hopefully pushing more media companies to do, as the director of the film, Sam Feder, mentioned, that for production, they made it a point to hire trans people,
Mm.
at all levels, from camera to crew. And whenever they couldn't find trans people, then a cis person would mentor a trans person into learning that trade.
Wow.
And I think that's really important. That's
Yeah.
part of, these horrible images, ridiculous images of us as like crazy or victims, or,
Mm-hmm.
just horrible, are going to go away. It's when we start telling our own stories. And, I think that's the hope that comes out of disclosure, that,
Yes.
there are more people who are, putting content out there that's more true. And so, crossing fingers that continues.
And I'm trying to think of because they were talking about like they were talking about representations of trans men, and then like now more representation of gender non-conforming or non-binary folks. That's kind of slowly coming into play, right? And it made me think of, I'm almost surprised that nobody mentioned this character from, what was it? Was it Mad TV or Saturday Night Live? One of those. Pat.
Oh, it's Pat. Yeah, I know. That's interesting. That, like,
Yeah.
You couldn't, like, I don't know, I guess they were non-binary or gender
Yes.
non-conforming, and
Yeah.
it was like, it's Pat, and they were
Yeah.
always trying to ask questions to like
Yeah.
get Pat to reveal their gender or something.
Exactly, because it was like, what are you? What are you? This much
Mm-hmm.
confusion. And then later on, they introduced another character, Robin, which Robin was also another ambiguous character that was their partner, and no one still they couldn't tell. You know, so I think about that. I think about Peppermint Patty from the Charlie
Mm-hmm.
Brown. And I also think about Bugs Bunny. I have to say, Bugs Bunny was the biggest diva when I was growing up. Bugs Bunny was always in drag, always, you know, and it was always getting in drag and then making people fall in love with him. You know, like it was always like this falling in love, and then they realize it's the bunny. And I think they talked about this in Disclosure as well. You know, and then it's like kill the rabbit, and it's like interesting that it is revealed, and now it's kill the rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another one of those moments of like the recognition of like gender fluidity, because
Hmm.
Bugs Bunny always had the upper hand when they were able to
Yes.
like go fluid from one to the other. And yeah, like as a kid, I think there was a recognition there of like, ooh, that's like a power there. There's something
Hmm.
to that.
Yes, 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 that is true. I like that. And then I'm also thinking about this. I used to watch this show called Bones, and it's about this. She
Detective or something? Is
yeah,
it like a cop show?
yeah, she studies bones, like, and she figures out how people are killed and stuff. But anyway, there was this episode that I always remember it because this other detective from another agency came to where they were, and it was an Asian guy, or an Asian person, I should say. And the entire episode were them trying to figure out if this person was a man or a woman because they could not tell until the very end, when one of the characters hugged the Asian person and then said, "Oh, that's a guy." And they were like, "Why? How do you know?" It's like, "I felt a little poke or something." And I couldn't believe it because it was just like they really put a lot of effort into talking about what
Yeah.
this person was for really no apparent reason whatsoever. So those moments pop up for me in the like ambiguous gender nonconformity thing when, and sometimes those are very negative, like Pat and Robin, and this an episode in Bones. But then I think about the powerful, like I was absolutely in love with Annie Lennox and Grace Jones. Their just ambiguity was so beautiful to me, and I was just like drawn to that. So seeing Annie Lennox dressed the way she did, um, and seeing like women dressed in suits and things really gave me permission, because I was like dressing pretty. I was very ambiguous in high
And
school.
I think one of the things that really made me think was when you were talking about this right now was, mentioning that character and how the whole episode was spent, trying to figure out whether the person was male or female, and then finally feeling a bump
Hmm.
down there. And for me, that just makes me think how this behavior of really being intrusive and inappropriate is normalized for
Yeah.
cisgender people, that they get to do that. They
Yeah.
get to question somebody's identity to the degree where they're like feeling up their body part to get clues.
Hmm.
Um, that's normal for cis people to do
Yeah.
that because we're not normal. And
Yeah.
so they get to treat us that way. And
Hmm.
how, for me, that just feels so truly sick
Yeah.
that, in those situations, we're really being victimized.
Hmm.
But, it's not seen that way.
No.
And, I think that that's what's often never called out, that, what we're seeing is that kind of normalization, that if you hound somebody all the time to try to figure out whether their identity is binary, that's okay.
Hmm.
And I think it's important for allies to recognize, hopefully, you know, that that's not okay. And that
Yeah.
if you don't know what somebody's gender identity is, that who cares?
Yeah.
You know, is that relevant to the work that you're doing? And if it's not, then who cares? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and so yeah, it made me, as you were talking, it made me think about that. Like that just is, it feels so intrusive, but you
Yeah.
know, it's put into the framework of comedy. Like,
Yeah.
ha ha, it's funny to do this
Yeah.
to trans people, you
And
know?
it's almost like a right. It's like I have a right to know what is between your legs. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
right now, because I am confused. Therefore, you must clear this up for me. And even the name of the documentary, Disclosure, it's just like you must disclose. You must tell me these things, and it's just like it's really shitty. And you think
Mm-hmm.
when you think about like when I saw it over and over, the Katie Couric interview, where that's like the first thing, bam, like most of them it's like, you know, where's your penis, or did you get the surgery? And I just can't understand why any person would not understand that that is absolutely inappropriate, like absolutely inappropriate. um
Right? Like if had it been like a cis man asking a cis woman about her vagina and like tell me about the depth of your vagina and so describe
yeah,
your vagina to me, it would have been like over. It would have been
yeah,
appalling, like shut the cameras down, like,
yes.
you know, but for trans people it's like keep it rolling, you know, this is
Hmm.
entertainment.
Yes, yes. How do you have sex? When did you have the surgery? When are you thinking about it? What was your name before? Like it really does become about, this is not an actress or an actor. This is not a human being. This is, you know, like an experiment or a test or someone we can ask all these questions of. Like this is all about the transness and nothing else. And that is just like shitty. I mean, it's beautiful when people feel safe enough to say I am trans, and then have a young person hear that and say, "Oh my God, look, there's a trans person. That person is like me." You know, just seeing ourselves reflected is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and we're seeing more and more. But still, there's so much work to be done, and especially around race and class. I mean, there's still so much to be done. You know,
Do
and it.
you have a first sort of person who like lit the light for you and was like, oh my God, that's who I am? Did you have that experience, or is it different for you?
No, it wasn't like that for me. For me, it was like like I said, like any ambiguity, people that were very ambiguous, I felt like I wanted to be near them. I wanted to know more about them. I was drawn to them. When my mother allowed me to dress myself for the first time in ninth grade, this is when I started dressing the way I wanted to, and really dressing in this ambiguous kind of way. So it wasn't, I didn't have a name for it or anything. It just felt right and comfortable to me. And then later on, that got kind of conflated for me with lesbianism, right? It's like I came out as a lesbian, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I need to like be this particular kind of lesbian, right? So gender and sexual orientation got mashed together, and then it got detangled little by little, and then I got to this place, you know. But now I didn't really have uh any person in like Hollywood or media, which is really funny to say this. I grew up in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, and in this projects, and in that neighborhood, there was a gang that lived across the street, and the leader of the gang, his wife, was a trans woman. And my father was one of my father's good friends when I was growing up, was named Manny. And I remember Manny had breasts, and my father used to call Manny him. Nobody ever talked about it. We didn't have any words for it. We didn't have any conversation. You know, like that was this person, and that was that person, and that was it. And that's how everybody knew them. You know, I don't know what their life was like, because who knows if they had to keep their mouth shut or just become invisible. But for the most part, me growing up seeing these two people, um, it was quite interesting to see the
Mm,
existence of trans and gender nonconforming people, but not have any kind of language whatsoever to
yeah.
talk about that. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Um, and I mentioned that because for me, like one of the stories that they talked about in Disclosure, that was sort of that for me, I did kind of have that light bulb moment, was, Tula or Caroline Cossey.
Mhm.
And I remember watching her being interviewed on their Arsenio Hall show. And
Oh,
even when they showed that clip, he was like, "What do you do with your penis?" That was like the first question he asked her. And
yeah.
as a kid, I didn't remember that. For me, I think I was just so like, "Oh my God,
Yes.
this is it. I'm like her. I want to be like her. She's gorgeous. Look at her. Oh my, yes, this is it. I want to be like her." It was just like this moment of like, and I didn't remember the interview. I just remember seeing her and being like, "Oh my God, this is possible. I want to do this."
Hmm.
And then in Disclosure, seeing the clip and being like, "Wow, that was a horrible interview."
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's media's impact that like, I'm sure I heard it all, but as a kid, I only like focused on what I was seeing, but that
Right.
can't help but get in your head, as you grow
Oh.
up.
Oh yeah. I mean, if every person that's trans who gets an interview, if that's the first freaking question, geez, it's like this is like at a point where it's like enough is enough. Okay, like let's not even go to the genitals. Let's not go to hormones. Let's not go to any of that. Right. Um. um did we talk about the tits reveal, vomit, rage, and psychopaths?
I don't think we've touched on that
Well,
yet.
yeah, thinking about the actually it's like either the tit or penis reveal, right? It's like but the tit reveal is very particular, right? When someone playing a man, a woman who is disguised or playing a man, um, reveals rather than just saying, I am a woman. They have to show their titties, and I think that really speaks to something. It's almost like bringing the audience back to remember this is not a homosexual thing. This is a woman. Here are her breasts. Like because they are two guys, seemingly two guys together until one reveals that he's not. And it
Uh,
has to become this more this back to the sexual thing. Um,
and I think that comes from like the misogyny from male directors. So
yeah.
many times these films are directed by male directors, and of course, they want to like have a breast shot because it's not enough to just say, this person was assigned this at birth. It's like, oh, we got to show it.
Yes, exactly. And then on the other end, it's like the vomit. They talked a lot about the vomiting when it was found out that someone was, a trans woman that was in Ace Ventura, the Crying Game. Like people just needing to throw up when they find out, and how this creates this like this collective reaction, this collective societal reaction to transness, that or trans women specifically, like this is so gross to me, I'm gonna vomit, like. And when they
Like
said
it's
that in
such an assault to
yes,
your identity that you have to like vomit everything out of you. It's like, what the fuck?
that's
And
really intense. Like when you think about that, when you really think about, like really think about what it takes to feel so disgusted to vomit, like that's a lot. That's a lot to like have every scene be like that. That really shows like this depth of just grotesqueness
misogyny,
and
I think
misogyny. Like
it's fragile masculinity, men who
Yes.
are like so shaken by the idea of being attracted to a penis that, oh my God, I have to vomit, you know?
Hmm.
I think it's like often so much about misogyny and just men who are afraid of, you know, what masculinity outside of this sort of heteronormative, very, you know, strict way of being looks like, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
We talked about the rage, the testosterone raged. When they showed Max in the L Word, when I remember when I watched it, oh my god, when they showed how aggressive he was behaving, I was like, this is just so over the top. This is just not how people behave. It just me
right,
it really it feeds this idea too, like that. Well, it's the rage and then the loss of another woman to the men's side. It's like this. You are losing out on something so beautiful as womanhood, and you're giving it up.
traitor.
Traitor, all this stuff, and yeah, it's really interesting how they just do the guilt, kind of the guilt around that, and say almost like you see he got this testosterone, you see all this anger, this you're turning in to an aggressive like man, you're turning into the enemy. It's almost like yeah, you're turning into the enemy, which is quite interesting. um and then there are the other movies that they talked about. I have to say that I still have not watched Boys Don't Cry.
Oh, really?
I can't watch it. I can't
It's
because
hardcore, you know,
yeah, like
definitely.
so I of course I already know that there is a rape scene in the film, and those are very hard for me to watch in film. And then on top of that, the context, like what happened here. It's like I haven't brought myself to seeing it because it's just too difficult, because that that fear is so huge, like the rape fear. um that is a really intense fear. um
And you know what blew my mind about that was that I did not know that Brandon Tina had like essentially a best friend who was a black cis man.
yeah,
They
yeah,
totally erased that narrative from the movie. And
yeah,
that blew my mind. I was like, what? I had no, and like, how fucked up is that?
yeah.
Like, a man of color got murdered as well. And also, I mean, it gets hard sometimes because then it's like the layers of, you know, all of
Hmm.
what we're talking about, the misogyny from like a male lens, you
Yeah,
know, to interpret a trans experience. But then also uh, the racism,
yeah,
you know, then on top of that comes racism. And it's like, oh my God, like,
yeah. And even the whole story of Stonewall, like that was just
oh, that was such bullshit.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I can't even believe that they actually made that. Like, who are all these white people? What are you fucking like, who and where are the trans people? Like, I just didn't understand how they could have produced such lies, like outward, like right in your face lies. And it's just the whitewashing, it's it's really trying to mold and shift this story that isn't real, that just isn't real. And I'm glad that Disclosure, like, you know um is here to like really continue this conversation of like, we can't have this shit anymore. We got to make our own media, and or we have to continue fighting, so that we have better representation in media, and increase the representation, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we're talking about representation in Hollywood, but this is just the beginning. This is to continue the education, the visibility,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. Because really true, like, this is not just about, if we're thinking about why is this so important to talk about, I'm not trans, I don't know anybody who's trans, it's really important to talk about, because if you, I mean, you can see a lot of parallels, not similarities. Just like, I mean, some parallels that you can draw from. They're not the same, but we can draw from history and see how oppression has really fucked with a whole slew of us, right? And representation in Hollywood media, anywhere. We can talk about women. We can talk about, people of color, black people. We can talk about how this conversation has been had over and over and over by different populations of people who have not been represented in big, big ways, right? And so we keep pushing so that we get a clear representation of all people, right? People with disabilities, trans people, people of color, just a real vision of who we are, because really what Hollywood has become is a fantasy.
And that's why I started, our conversation with a push. And I think, we should definitely have a campaign to get Disclosure the Academy, because I think it does a lot. Hollywood has a huge influence, not just in the States, globally. It shapes, the
Mhm.
thinking around many identities and communities, through the movies that are put out and that the world sees, really.
Yeah.
Um, and, I think that elevating Disclosure to an Oscar winner, I think will make it so that more eyes see it around the world as well.
Hmm.
But also that, hopefully it'll be that catalyst to stop, you know, not the horrible representations often at the hands of cis directors, but also to open up Hollywood so that trans producers, directors, writers are in those spaces, writing those characters, getting
Yes.
those deals, getting movies made. I think that's really what's needed, and the next level to this. Now that with like a movie Disclosure, we know better. It's
Hmm.
time to do better.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the Heal Project, like how this trickles down is, we have kids watching TV. We got movies that people are, taking in. And if you're watching a film or a movie where a trans person is represented in a negative light, then that's a great opportunity to have a conversation. Um, it's great to ask your children, do they have trans friends? Do they know anyone? Do they talk about pronouns in their school? It's just an opportunity to communicate and see what's going on. At this point, your child might be cis girl or a cis boy, but you never know what if that might change. And if there is more representation out there, and there is more positive representation where we're getting good stories, healthy stories, then this will help families get really good information for when they have a gender nonconforming child come out to them, that it's not going to be so horrible, such a shock. They won't feel alone because it's going to be woven in into our everyday lives. And it is proven. It is like in studies in the US trans survey that came out, and the survey before that, and it's very clear. If trans people that have had support from their families, have had like the percentage rate of them not being homeless, finishing school, having a place to live, all of those go way up. It's like family support equals, I am living a better life. I am living actually a life. Without family support, suicidal ideation goes up, homelessness goes up, health conditions are bad. So this is not just a conversation about Hollywood representation. This is about how this representation trickles into our homes, into our children's eyes, into their brains, and how they behave and see themselves and how they respond to other people. So this is a great documentary and a great talking piece for kids of all ages, actually. Um, yeah, and they half the when they talked about my Life in Pink movie, and I don't know
I
how to say it.
love that film,
Oh,
My Vion Rose.
oh, so beautiful. That
So
part
beautiful.
where the mother cuts the little kid's hair off in the bathroom, I cry every time. And that piece, I think about that. I think about a young gender nonconforming or a young trans child watching that and feeling that pain, because just like looking at that little kid getting his hair cut, I feel that pain. And thinking about uh, even having that imagery, that emotion expressed on film. Like it's sometimes we don't have the words, but the emotion expressed in front of you is like there's something there. You know. Uh,
Yes.
mm.
One movie that, or I guess show that came out after Disclosure, but that I highly recommend, is on HBO Max. It's called Veneno, about a trans woman in Spain called Cristina La Veneno, who was a famous sex worker.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my God, that show not only is amazing, but it's all trans actors playing the trans characters. And the directors really made it a point to, make sure that not only the story was accurate and true to who she was, but also that, all of the actors and behind the scenes, were trans people.
Oh,
And so,
wow.
it's happening. It's happening, like
This is awesome.
people are getting it. And especially when we're talking about millennial, filmmakers and content
Mm-hmm.
makers, they're really getting it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, that gives me hope,
Yeah, yeah. I definitely have hope for the future. Definitely have hope for the representation. I mean, look at what we have now. I look at TV and movies now, and like, wow, there are so many people out there, so many actresses and models that are just like holding it down, and it's just like this is beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. So thank you so much for talking with me about Disclosure. I hope you could come back and talk with me about something else. Maybe the one that you just recommended. I would love to.
Oh my God. Yes,
Yeah.
watch it. And I would love to come back and talk about that show. It's just
Okay.
incredible. And even like the people who are still alive today from that period,
Hmm.
they're amazing. And so, yes, watch it and tell me what you think. I'm
Okay.
really, really curious.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This is Connecting the Dots, and we'll see
Thank
you next time.
you.
Bye.
Bye.